one of two presentations today that comes out of Dr. Katherine Steinmetz's lab.
I'm Dymia, Brannon.
I'm Ratcliffe.
I'm Emily Masten.
I'm Saachi.
I'm Darien, Pisacano.
And I'm Eleanor.
And we're going to be presenting our study. Our title is Making Your Mark, How First Impressions Influence Memory and Social Decision Making. Okay, so imagine this is your new professor, it's your first day of class, and this is your first impression of him. He seems very understanding, he's very approachable, and he even drops the lowest exam grade. However, he only allows 2 bathroom breaks, and if you go over, he drops the grade. Now, would you recognize him out of context? So imagine you see him at the grocery store. By show of hands, how many of us would approach him?
It's not that many.
And how many of us would turn and go the other way?
Garrett's done it before.
Okay, this just shows that hearing different things about a person can influence how we feel about them and the social decisions that we make. And this is the premise behind our entire study, in which we look at how positive and negative social information influences how we remember people and our decisions to approach and deal with them.
So in day-to-day life, we encounter both emotional and neutral information. Studies have shown that emotional information can lead to more specific and detailed memory. So this can help explain how emotions shape our memory around faces and social impressions tied to them. The relationship between faces, emotion, and memory can be impacted by its valence. So depending if the valence is negative or positive, can lead to a different recall. Studies have shown that it doesn't just affect whether we remember someone, but how we remember them. Another key factor that we learned here was that positive information is often associated with familiarity, meaning someone may feel recognizable or known to you, whereas negative information can lead to remembrance for specific details of a person. This distinction may also lead us to the Brannon build perspective, where positive emotions can lead to broader and more flexible processing, and negative emotions can lead to narrowed attention toward memory of specific details. Another key factor here is the attentional bias we all have, where we unconsciously focus on one piece of information over another. This selective attention can cause difference in encoding and whether we can recall them later on. So we have 2 research questions. One of them is, how does positive and negative first impressions lead to differences in memory or social behaviors? And does your second impression have a lasting impact on memory and social behaviors? I want you to think back to the example of Dr. Hilton and how you were super excited that he dropped that lowest test grade, but then you were super disappointed when he gives you no bathroom breaks. We want to know if that second impression can override your first impression.
All right, and the current study had 102 participants from the ages of 18 to 35. We also utilized the Tobii Pro Spark eye tracking system, which can be seen here with the little red dots showing where attention was focused via the eyes. The current study used only neutral faces, and each face was randomly paired with an image, and each image was randomly paired with a sentence. Participants were also instructed to link the image and the sentence together by imagining what the sentence said. There were 4 separate conditions. The first being positive, meaning that there was a positive sentence shown, and then a few slides later, another positive sentence. The second condition was a positive sentence, and then a negative sentence. The third condition was a negative sentence, and then a few slides later, a positive one. The fourth and final condition was a negative sentence as well as another negative sentence. After each image and sentence was shown, a rating was made about how pleasant the participant felt. Exactly 2 days later, participants returned to the lab for a memory retrieval session. I'm going to give you a memory test. So for this, it's important to know that recollection is episodic memory with specific details, meaning that you're going to remember the face and specific details. And familiarity is semantic memory without details, meaning that you're going to know the face and maybe not some certain details with it. And then new is if it's someone who's new to you, and then approach is if you would like to go up to them, and back away is if you're going to avoid them. So please raise your hand if you recall specific information about this man. Okay. What about if you're familiar with him? And what if you think he's new? And who would approach him? Nobody? And who would back away from him? And this was repeated for all the stimuli presented. It is also important to know that the recollection and approach conditions were counterbalanced.
Okay, so for results, we first looked at the approach responses of participants. This was done during session 2, which was the memory task, and participants were presented with a facial image and they would respond with approach or back away. For our x-axis, it represents the positive and negative first impression, and then the y-axis is the approach responses, and we did that in percentage. We found that second impression did not affect the participant's judgment at all, so we only looked at the first impression. So for our results, we found that participants were more likely to approach an individual with a positive social descriptor first compared to a negative social descriptor first. And this supported our hypothesis because we believe that if you have a positive first impression, you're going to approach someone who's friendly and nice. Another analysis also found that participants were more likely to approach any individual that they had seen before with the facial images rather than a new face that was just shown in the session 2. And then secondly, we looked at the memory of the participants. This was also during session 2, which was the memory task. This measured recollection and familiarity. And then for the x-axis, this represents a positive and negative first impression for recollection and familiarity. And the y-axis is the corrected memory score, which this was calculated with hits minus false alarms. So for recollection, we found in the results that a positive social descriptor first marginally enhanced recollection. And then for familiarity, we found a negative social descriptor first enhanced familiarity. And this did not support our hypothesis because we believed that a negative first impression would associate with recollection because negative information is enhanced descriptively. However, a potential reason as to why negative first impressions associate with familiarity is because the negative information itself is the only thing that is enhanced in memory, and potentially the items associated with it, the memory is disrupted. So potentially individuals were just looking at the social descriptor, which was the negative information, rather than the facial image, and were unable to bind the social sentence and the information together during encoding.
Yeah, so to understand the finding that negative information was more associated with familiarity as compared to recollection, we can look at our eye tracking results, which measured participants' overt visual attention tendencies. On the x-axis, we have whether the face was paired with a positive sentence or whether the face was paired with a negative sentence. And the y-axis is the gaze duration on face in seconds, meaning how much time in seconds participants spent looking at the face as compared to the social behavioral descriptor below. We found that participants spent significantly more time looking at the faces paired with negative sentences as compared to positive sentences, which makes sense why we found that negative information was associated with familiarity, because participants were spending more time looking at the face rather than encoding the details from the social behavioral description below. And this is a kind of a cool video. This is from a particular participant. I'm going to play a video of their eye tracking as they're looking at a face paired with a positive sentence. As you can see here, their eyes move back and forth between the face and the social behavioral descriptor a pretty equal amount. But when the same face with the same participant was shown with a negative sentence, notice how their eyes really fixate on the face as compared to the social behavioral descriptor. Pretty cool.
Awesome. So to wrap things up, here are some of our key findings. And the first one is that first impressions really matter and they're difficult to change. And this was shown because participants really relied on the first piece of information that they learned about their face to make that initial judgment. And the information they learned following that didn't really impact whether or not they had a positive or negative impression or if they would approach or avoid them in the future. It was really the first thing they learned about them. Secondly, our big finding was that positive first impressions lead to more detailed memory of the person. And so this was supported by the eye tracking, so that positive interaction led to participants remembering multiple things about the person, so the face and the information they were learning about, versus the negative faces and negative sentence, that wasn't really the case. And then as we can see with the eye tracking, this makes sense because with the positive face and the positive sentence, participants were spending about equal amounts of time looking at the face and sentence, versus when it was a negative sentence, people mainly just focused on the face. And then our third major finding was that positive first impressions lead to a higher likelihood of approaching the individual in the future. And this shows that having that positive initial interaction with a person is really beneficial in building future relationships with them, because you're more likely to want to approach them and be their friend in the future. So some of these real-world implications go back to our professor example, but a professor putting in time and effort to have a really positive first day in class with the students can be really beneficial for students because they'll want to approach them more in the future. Same with things like job interviews, putting in time and preparation into making a good impression on the employer is beneficial, not only for them wanting to work with you, but also so they remember multiple different things about you, so multiple positive characteristics. And our last thing we related this to was social media and how people are forming first impressions literally based on an image of a face and a sentence. And so this shows that even online presence can help you to have and make those first impressions on people if you highlight your positive qualities.
And we'd like to thank our advisor, Dr. Steinmetz, and our collaborator from Wofford College, as well as all the research assistants that made this research possible.